Welcome, everyone, to the Union Federation podcast, where we discuss both Star Trek and the Orville here on the Fandom Podcast Network. My name is Kevin. I'm going to be your captain, and we are having a lot of fun on this limited series here. We are discussing the Star Trek Q Fan Collective episodes, all of the Q episodes from 1997 through 2002. That is from TNG through DS9, and of course, Voyager. This is a Union Federation podcast, and we can be found, of course, on the Fandom Podcast Network and the BQN. And if you're watching our live YouTube video here, please check out the QR code there. And if you are watching us live, please participate in the chat. We love to hear from you, ask questions and stuff. We always love feedback from you guys. And if you're listening to this podcast, thank you so much. Please share it out. We appreciate that. Let's introduce our crew on this Union Federation starship. With me, as always, is the co-founder of the Fandom Podcast Network. He is my co-captain and now back cleaning the peak corner here on our ship. Please welcome Mr. Kyle Wagner. What's up, buddy?
No. I am done with the P corner. I have just spent 300 years in a comment that you beat me out of for the show, which I much appreciated because you want to talk about P corner. but there's a rumor too that the boys are back in town. This is an all boys episode of the Union Federation.
Yes, it is. We're missing the ladies tonight, but that's okay. Yes, this is the boys' show here tonight. The boys are back in town. A little Thin Lizzy reference there. But so with that said, let's bring our special guest ambassador that's been with us day one of these Q episodes. Please welcome our special guest ambassador, Mr. Gary Akers. What's up, buddy?
Hi, it's great to be with you. This is my first exploration of the Delta Quadrant on the Union Federation. So I'm very happy that you guys are here to accompany me.
Yeah, buddy.
Hopefully it won't take 75 years for us to get back.
Hopefully not. So yeah, Kyle, what's you got?
That just gave me a thought. What would the crew of the Orville do if they were stuck in the Delta Quadrant to each other? the practical jokes from Malloy would just be...
We got Jim says Death Wish is an absolute phenomenal episode. Yeah. Well, we're going to talk about that. We appreciate you chiming in there, Jim. Please give us your thoughts as we continue with this. Thank you for checking in as always. Yeah, it's going to be interesting conversation with this, especially the topic of immortality. And of course, as Jim mentioned and reminded us here, that we are discussing Star Trek Q episodes. This is Death Wish from 1996 episode of Star Trek Voyager. This is Union Federation episode 237. But before we go any further, though, I want to let you know what's happening on the Fandom Podcast Network. Specifically, if you have not heard and what we've been doing here in Union Federation, we talked to our previous episodes. We did every 2-part episode of Star Trek Next Generation. We also did speaking of the Orville, we did Orville crew profiles. It was a 10-episode limited series where we showcased every main crew member there, including our special episode on guest stars, a lot who were Star Trek alumni in front and behind the camera. We also gave our thoughts on Star Trek Section 31. We said goodbye to Star Trek Lower Decks and celebrated Season 5. And we also did Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 3. And we are celebrating the Q Fan Collective here that came out in 2006, 2007. And we are well into our episodes. We've covered all of the TNG episodes. And we had a little quick stop at Deep Space Nine. Our last TNG episode, of course, we did was All Good Things. Really good episode there. And, of course, prior to that, we did Tapestry. But now we are rounding out the final 3 episodes of this limited 12-part series with the Voyager episodes, where Q had a little bit of a run there. I want to actually stop right there, and I want to ask you guys real quick regarding Q and Voyager. I felt like this episode that we're going to be discussing here maybe was some proving ground of whether or not Q should be messing with the Voyager crew, to where he came back for 2 more episodes. And it's been a while since I've watched the next 2, because obviously I've watched this new one, Death Wish, for this reminder as we do this episode. But it seems like Q got a little bit of run. Maybe he worked well with the crew. What are your thoughts on that, Gary?
Like you, it's been a while since I've seen the subsequent 2 Q episodes we're going to cover. But I noticed on this one, his interactions were mostly with Janeway. Tuvok was mostly focused on the other Q. But I thought he really worked well with Captain Janeway. Some similarities to Picard, a lot of differences, but it never felt like they were retreading old ground just on a different ship. The dynamic did feel different.
Yeah. Kyle, we're getting into some where we learn more about Q. Things get a little more personal with Q, and it seems like this episode, and we'll get into it more, that there seems to be a good rapport between him and Janeway and the cast.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because Jim brings up in the chat, Q became more lighthearted on Voyager. It might have had something to do with the fact that Lancie had a wonderful friendship with Kate Mulgrew.
Yeah.
And I think it definitely shows.
Excellent point, Jim. Yeah.
I think it definitely shows. But I think the interesting aspect of Q on Voyager too is because of the Voyager situation. Here's Q with a chant who literally has the ability to bring them home, and I think that really is an interesting dynamic. Anytime you have Q on Voyager, because one snap of the fingers and they're home, and I think that puts it. And there's different personalities, and I think Janeway is a much more interactive personality that fits with Q compared to what we saw like when he was on Deep Space Nine with Sisko. And I think Janeway always presented a different challenge to Q, and we gotta remember, it's a Q who has a different perspective on humanity after all of his interactions with Picard. And I think he finds Janeway kind of fascinating because in some ways I think she does remind him of Picard in certain aspects.
I think he likes strong women too. He's attracted to them, no matter what species that they are. We'll get into that a little bit later. I did want to give a shout out, as I always do, to my good friend Joe Caroni here. He did this wonderful art piece of Q, and please check out all of his wonderful art at joecaroni.com. Big fan of sci-fi in general, especially Star Wars, but he loves Star Trek and other fandoms as well. He's done a lot of work for comic books, so I want to give him a shout out there. And he's also, if you want to check it out too, he's also got it hanging up right behind me right there. So go check him out. Now, as we go on, we are discussing Q episodes, of course. Well, why we're doing that? We're celebrating this DVD set that came out here, and I got my own copy right here. It's so funny, guys. I was at my local thrift store the other day, and I found another copy of this in better condition, and I bought it for $2.
Good for you.
The whole set. So I might either give that one away or do something fun with the one I've been showcasing here. So yeah, but that 12 episodes of Q are on that set there, and we wanted to celebrate it, and everyone loves Q. And for a reminder, guys, please go back and check out our first episode that included Q, of course, and that is Encounter at Farpoint, the first episode of TNG. We had a lot of fun covering that one, but we also did the history of Q, gave a little background in other media that Q was also highlighted in. And we also had a lot of fun and called the still existing Q hotline. And we showcased the audio on that. So make sure you check that out. But let's go. Oh, yes, Gary, what you got?
Yes, just really quickly, I have to ask, when you were at the thrift store, did that excite your righteous indignation as a lifelong Trek fan? And you went up and it says, "How dare you sell this for only $2?"
No, I was thinking like, score $2 for a better copy of this. Hell yeah. Being a huge physical media collector too,
yes.
I've upgraded from DVD to Blu-ray many times, or sometimes like that. But if I have kind of a beat up copy of something, and I'll find it, like I did with this, I'll upgrade it, and maybe I'll have some money, give that one away, or maybe give it back to the thrift store. We'll see how that things go. Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and get into the first away mission. Well, guys, we have moved on from TNG and, of course, our one episode of Deep Space Nine. We are talking Star Trek Voyager with these Q episodes. And this is episode 237, Union Federation. And we are discussing Star Trek Voyager Death Wish from 1996. And we're going to get into the Admiral's episode log synopsis. As I read this, Kyle, if you can go ahead and scroll through the pictures there. We got some pictures from the episode, so enjoy as I give you a little information on Death Wish. So Death Wish has an IMDb rating of 8.3 out of 10, which is very high, higher than I expected. The original episode aired February 19, 1996. Here is the synopsis. investigating of a faux comet accidentally releases a suicidal Q philosopher, later called Quinn, whom the Continuum imprisoned over 300 years ago to prevent his death and unbalance their society. When Q appears, of course, that's the de Lancie version, Q appears to put him back. Quinn demands asylum. A chase ensues with Voyager in tow, which Captain Janeway ends by calling for a hearing to decide whether to return Quinn to his confinement and live, or to grant his request for immortality and risk him ending his own life. And if you're watching the slides here, we got a couple of really cool guest stars in there, including Mr. Riker himself, which we'll get into a little bit later. But this is Death Wish here, guys. And so before we get into the main discussion of this as well, what we want to do is go ahead and slide into some trivia. All right, we got 4 bits of trivia here for you from Star Trek Voyager. And Kyle, I'm going to go ahead and have you read the first one here.
The image of Earth that Q shows Janeway is the famous blue marble picture photograph taken in December of 1972 by the crew of the NASA spacecraft Apollo 17 upon returning to Earth following the final moon landing of the Apollo program. With one snapshot, Apollo 17 transformed our vision of Earth forever. The blue marble image ignited a love of astrophotography that's still going strong 50 years later.
This article. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, the crew of Apollo 17, Harrison H. Schmidt, Eugene A. Cernan, and Ron Evans posed with a lunar roving vehicle trainer here. And I believe we have that right there up on the screen there, Mr. Reitzel.
Yes, and the article that I got this from was from Tatiana Woodall, and she published this back in 2022. So that was more of an earlier one there. But I thought that was really cool that they included this famous picture of the big blue marble, as everyone has nicknamed it there. So there you go. Jim says this chase scene is very funny. Yes, the one the chase scene between the two Qs was hilarious, and you could just tell that Janeway was just like a mom going, "All right," and grabs her ears, and says, "All right, we're gonna stop this now." So it's pretty funny. All right, the next bit of trivia that we have here is number 2. One of Quinn's hiding places from Q involves turning Voyager into a Christmas ornament. Well, believe it or not, the same year this episode aired in 1996, Hallmark released a Voyager Christmas ornament of the ship.
Wait, so I can blame Q for my missing Voyager ornament. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, exactly. All right, Kyle, go ahead and hit us up with the third bit of trivia there.
Absolutely. According to the short article entitled Bringing Back Q, appearing in the February 17th, 1996 issue of TV Guide, Michael Piller originally wanted to bring on more guest stars for this episode than actually had appeared. According to Piller, we tried to get Michael Jordan, but he wants to be hired as an actor, not as himself. He also wanted to get Cal Ripken, Bill Gates, Henry Kissinger, or Frank Sinatra, adding, "Hey, we aim high."
I got to ask the question. I'm going to start with you, Gary. Of those mentioned names, we got Michael Jordan, Cal Ripken, Bill Gates, Henry Kissinger, and Frank Sinatra. Which one of those would you have wanted to see on this episode if you could have gotten it?
Sinatra all the way. I am a Sinatra fan. Beam me back, baby.
Jordan was huge.
I would just say, he would, as he said goodbye to Janeway, we get a Scooby Dooby Doo, as he goes back.
Jim in the chat says Michael Jordan. Yeah, Jordan was at his peak at this time. He was popular. Kyle, what about you? Who would you have liked to have seen come in of those mentioned celebrities?
Come on, it's Star Trek. How can you not have Bill Gates?
That's what I was thinking. I was kind of leaning towards Bill Gates.
Especially considering how they were played up the Isaac Newton thing and all of that. You can see Q influencing Bill Gates somehow.
You know what would have been funny, though, Gary, is if they actually would have gotten Joe Piscopo to play Frank Sinatra.
Singing his, Ebony and Ivory takeoff that he did with Eddie Murphy. And
exactly.
Oh, that would have been brilliant.
You are black and
I am white. Life's an Eskimo pie. Let's take a bite. Yeah, there you go.
That would have been just weird because since Joe was in an early episode of teaching Data how to laugh, that would have been funny.
That's right. And can I say that is a great shot of Kate Mulgrew, John de Lancie on that cover. That's just a terrific photo.
Yeah, it is. It is. This is when I miss TV Guide, is seeing all these great articles and pictures of people of your favorite shows.
I'm just imagining now a table with John de Lancie, Patrick Stewart, and Kate Mulgrew just sitting there, and how fascinating it would be just to listen to the conversation.
Yeah. Okay, guys. So the next bit of trivia hit a little home for me and surprised me when I found this out for this episode. Now, for those of you that know me or maybe follow me on Instagram, I have another not so secret Instagram page, and that is Traveling Tosk. Tosk is one of my favorite characters from Deep Space Nine, from I think it's episode 5 of season 1. He was the first traveler to come through the wormhole, and here is an unopened Tosk one. But I take an open Tosk with me almost everywhere where I travel, and I take pictures of him on my travel, and you can find him on Instagram at Traveling Tosk. I'll be putting up some more soon. He's been taking a little bit of break, but that's one of my favorite episodes. And the reason why I bring it up, guys, is because the next bit of trivia really surprised me about this. Let me share this with you here. So our Quinn actor, Garrett Graham, previously played a hunter in Star Trek Deep Space Nine Captive Pursuit. That's the one where Tosk was running from, because he was genetically bred to be prey, basically. And it was very dishonorable for him to be captured. And of course, he came across Deep Space Nine, and they followed him there. They captured them, and he felt very disgraced. And if it weren't for our good old Chief O'Brien, who set him free and let the hunt begin, or continue again, basically. But Garrett Graham plays one of these guys who I also have a action figure of right here. Check this out.
Wow.
Yeah. What's really, really funny though is it must be Kismet. That's the right word that I'm using. So my wife and I were doing a little traveling down south to a city called Ventura, not too far from where I live, and we found this used kind of toy / sci-fi store, and they have like games and DVDs and all kinds of fun stuff. And I found an unopened Tosk. I found an unopened hunter, and on top of that, I found a Vash. So
I'm gonna have to go shopping with you, Kevin, because I mean you have some kind of luck, when it comes to things that you find.
I do. I get like that. But anyway, I thought that was really cool that he was in that episode of Deep Space Nine. So anyway, that concludes the trivia there, guys. So let's go ahead and get into the first away mission. All right. We got a comment from Jimmy saying he was a better Q. If he's referring to de Lancie or
Garrett Graham, I think.
Garrett Graham. Oh yeah, he was fantastic. We'll get into that later, for sure. But let's remind people this is episode 237 of Union Federation. We are discussing Star Trek Voyager Death Wish 1996, one of the Q episodes that we are highlighting as of today. But first, what we like to do is get into our Q quotes. Quote your favorite quotes from the episode, either from Q or Q Quinn or anyone else from the Voyager cast. And I want to start with you, Gary. What is 1 or 2 or 3 of your favorite quotes from this episode?
Well, since we are unfortunately without our better halves tonight, I can safely say that one of my memorable quotes is, "That's what you get for having a woman in the captain's chair."
Wait a minute. So wait, Gary, are you saying you cued the girls away tonight? Kind of like what you did to the men on the episode?
I'm not that powerful. And also, I love the line, is this a ship of the Valkyries, or have you human women finally done away with your men altogether?
Oh, we'll find out next week when we see who's hosting this podcast next week.
Yeah, it's been great being with you. I anticipate an accident happening to me this week sometime.
I love the one by Q where he goes, without Q, there would have been no William T. Riker at all, and I would have lost at least a dozen really good opportunities to insult him over the years.
Yeah.
Kyle, did you have any of your favorite quotes from this episode?
Janeway actually has my favorite quote because based on my research, you've been many things: a rude, interfering, inconsiderate, sadistic. Q, you've made your point, but Janeway hits him with this pest. Oh, yes, you introduced the Borg. Thank you very much. But there's one thing you have never been is a liar. Q, I think you've uncovered my one redeeming virtue. Am I blushing?
Yeah.
Because I love how Janeway calls him out on the Borg.
Yes. I like when Q goes to Janeway says, "Did anyone ever tell you you're angry when you're beautiful?"
Yeah, that was fantastic. All right, now I guess we get to find out if the pants really fit.
And then Q says, "Let's celebrate, just you and me, the two of us." And Janeway says, "What? I'll take you home. Before you know it, you'll be scampering across the meadow with your little puppies, the grass between your bare feet. A man coming over the hill, way in the distance, waves to you, runs to your arms. As you get closer, you see that it's me." I love that. That's such good stuff there. All right, guys, let's go ahead and get into the main mission report here. This is going to be some good stuff. So, one of the things that we do in this mission report here, of course, we are discussing Voyager, and it's the episode Death Wish here. One of the things that I ask you, is there any subplot scenes that stand out to you? Well, when it comes to this particular episode, there's not a lot of subplots with this one. It's all about our new Q wanting asylum, wanting to end his life. And real quick, I wanted to mention that Jim's in the chat says, what was the line to the effect that he would have bet Riker would have gotten command of the Voyager? Q would have been. Yeah, I don't remember. Yeah. But since this one is mostly all Q, what I wanted to kind of ask you guys first before we get into the main discussion of the main Q plot is, what was it like returning to Voyager? And it's because it had been a while for me, and I've been wanting to actually rewatch the entire show. And it was nice to see the crew again working together. And, you know, if there's another little scene or something that isn't part of the main Q plot, please feel free to cook there. David or Gary, I'm going to start with you.
No, you're right. Especially since, you know, we've been immersed in Next Gen for the last couple of months. But, you know, it's just really interesting, especially early Voyager. I mean, when Kess was there, there's still, you know, indulging their, you know, explorations like, oh, here's a great comet we haven't seen. Let's go follow that. The theme music always gives me chills for this series. I adore the theme music.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Oh, absolutely. No, just in a general, because, you know, this is the way I felt about returning to Voyager, you know, in general. And it's
real quick, I just gotta build on that real quick.
Sure.
Every time I hear the Voyager one, I feel like it's, to me, I think of the big three TV shows. I'm not going to count the original one because it's just so classic, but like between TNG, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager, I feel like Voyager is right there next to the TNG thing one, because it's just got that beautiful music. I mean, they all do. And then, you know, the flying through all of the asteroids, and the whatever you want to call it, the Gorgonzola cluster, as you call it from the last episode.
I've always thought that the Deep Space Nine theme for me, which I adore, is there's always, I feel, with the DS9 theme, kind of that instant sense of kind of like isolation, like it's out there alone, and the graphics emphasize that. But with the Voyager theme, it's much more sweeping, in keeping with their sense of travel and exploration.
Yeah, God, it gets me every time.
Yeah. And no, it's just, that's really all I have to say about it now. It was just really, I mean, in terms of returning to Voyager in general, I mean, if you want me to say what it was like, you know, returning to this specific episode, or
just returning to Voyager.
I just, like I said, early Voyager, it's so distinct because, you know, we spent so many years with Seven, you know, who returned later in Picard. But then, you know, the early days of Voyager are very unique in themselves.
That's good points. Yeah. Kyle, what say you? What about returning to Voyager here?
So it's kind of interesting for me because I think Voyager's kind of had a little Voyager-sance in the last couple of years. thanks to Star Trek animation in particular.
Hmm.
Lower Decks did a couple of great Voyager-centric episodes and running jokes.
Prodigy?
That's where I was going to hit. Star Trek Prodigy, which of course was on Netflix and tied in with Nickelodeon, picked up for a season 2. But that show really exposed a lot of people to Voyager, especially Janeway and some of the things going on there. And I thought Prodigy was an excellent show. And it got a lot of people putting their eyes on Voyager who either hadn't watched it in a long time or who never watched Voyager. And I think that kind of helped with a very good Voyager renaissance to it. I had kind of started revisiting Voyager and then got sidetracked because there's so much out there. It's something I do want to get back to. But the nice thing is here, when this episode hits, we're at the point where Voyager is really starting to find its legs a little bit. And there, you can tell, much like TNG, much like DS9, they're in the newer season. They're not in for the first season, and they've started to figure out their characters a little bit and started to find their legs. And you can, especially Janeway, you're really starting to get a feel for Janeway. Tuvok is excellent in this episode as well. So you're starting to see these characters start to flesh out more, and I think that's a really good thing. And Kevin, I will say this: I think there's a second subplot in this. Besides, it is Q. It involves a Q, but I really think it is Q meeting Janeway, because I think the Q Janeway relationship is, in its own way, is just as intriguing and changing of Q, just as Picard was, but in different matters. And Q's infatuation with Janeway is definitely a little different than what his infatuation with Picard was. Let's just say that.
That's a good point. Definitely. But, he's intrigued from like the get-go, which I find fascinating, and for me personally, I really enjoyed coming back to Voyager, and I have a soft spot for Voyager, I really do. And there's several of the characters that I really, really like. And I kind of feel Voyager, there was some episodes in the first season that were kind of but I felt like it didn't take long for them to start galloping on the horse, so to speak. I felt like that they were, they got together pretty well. They had some good dilemma type episodes, and I felt the crew, because you had the dividing of the crew, the old Maquis with the Federation and trying to work together, and what's funny was when I was rewatching this episode, I was reminded that there's still a little bit of tension between the crew when it comes to that. And the episode that rolled into it, I don't remember the name of it, but Paris and Chakotay were kind of button heads on some stuff, and that makes for good drama, and I like that. And I felt that they really kind of honed their family-esque, starship family going forward. Kyle,
you guys are a little bit more Trek than I am, but I've a question. It's kind of been in the back of my mind since we were talking Voyager. Was not the plan to have Ensign Ro be part of Voyager?
Deep Space Nine.
Yeah.
Deep Space Nine.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, Deep Space Nine, which would have been interesting. It was supposed to be, instead of Kira, we were supposed to get Ensign Ro, right?
Now, Kyle, maybe the one thing you're thinking of is at one point they were considering having Robert Duncan O'Neill play his Nick Locarno character from the TNG episode. That's why there's some surface similarities to Paris, but I think they realized that character would have been so compromised already that you couldn't, like, quote unquote, reform him and make him a legitimate ongoing character. So they basically kept the actor, but made the Tom Paris character a little bit, a lot more palatable.
Which is why, for me personally, going through the whole thing, and I've rewatched this Voyager series a few times, and Paris ended up become my favorite character for several episode arcs that he did, and the fact that he built the Delta Flyer, which I thought was really cool, and he was into cars and stuff like that. So
turned into a salamander.
Yeah. You had to bring that up. Oh my God, Gary!
Could we also say turned into the second best actor turned director on Star Trek?
Yes. Well, and Roxanne Dawson also became a great director as well.
Yeah, that's true. Jim says Tom Paris is Nick Locarno. Yeah. All right, guys, let's get into the next mission report. All right. Now, this is where I ask you guys your thoughts on the main Q storyline throughout this episode and its impact on the Star Trek timeline. Now, this is pretty much the whole meat of this episode is we are introduced to another Q who does not want to be immortal anymore. He wants to get away from the Q continuum. And of course, specific, another Q, aka Quinn seeks asylum aboard the Voyager so he can become immortal and die. A hearing is held aboard the Voyager with Q, de Lancie Q, to decide his fate. So there's a lot of stuff to kind of dive into here, guys, and I want to save the immortality discussion specifically on our last mission report here, but there's a lot to dive into here, guys. And of course, we get another Q hand motion instead of the snap. We get this little thing that he does with his whipping his fingers, like his first two fingers, or whatever it is. And we get some moments, of course, of the continuum that he was imprisoned on, and then when he finally becomes immortal. So I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on that. Gary, we're going to start with you, sir.
Well, just very quickly, regarding the hand motion, I was watching this. I was thinking all it would take is for Garrett Graham to separate his two fingers a little, and you wouldn't be able to show this episode in Britain. Especially considering how many times he does it.
Yes, this is true. Yes.
No, I think watching this episode, this is the best kind of Star Trek. Thought-provoking presentation of a very interesting ethical dilemma. Not only the issue itself, but how our characters grapple with it, how they eventually resolve it. This is the thing that Trek does better than any other type of show. And it really is interesting because in addition to the issue that they're grappling with, we actually find out a lot more about not only the main characters, Janeway primarily, but also Tuvok secondarily. We find out a lot more about Q, who after 9 episodes, we think, okay, well, we get Q, but they still find a way to evolve the character, and what they do with him not only fits in with the chronology, that we've been kind of documenting and discussing for the last couple of months, but it kind of pushes him along, like to the next stage of our Q's development. So, an episode that really can prevent a really well-written examination of an ethical issue and serve very well our characters. I think it's top notch.
Good stuff there. And Jim says, I like that Quinn had a different hand motion than de Lancie. It shows the individuality of the Q. And I remember Amanda Rogers had her own little thing when she did things as well. So, And then of course we get the Guinan, the hand thing, stuff like that. So yeah, good stuff there, Jim. Appreciate the thoughts. Kyle, your thoughts on the main Q storyline?
I thought it was very interesting, and I like the fact that it picks up from an episode of TNG as well and dealing with some of the dilemmas that it has. And I know we're saving the immortality discussion for later, but one of the things it gives you is an insight into the Q continuum and how being omnipotent isn't even all it's cracked up to be. And that even when you have all this power, once you become omnipotent, you can see everything, and you know so much. And I think one of the best moments of that dilemma is when Janeway's trying to figure out what to do with him once he's got asylum on Voyager, and they're like, well, he could blow away everybody in astrology or everybody away in engineering and so on and so forth. So I think there's a real interesting play on the aspect of what happens when a Q gets bored. And I love the fact that they played that up, even with how he admired what de Lancie's Q had done in the past and things of that nature. And it plays up on the aspect of not only are you omnipotent, and you in the immoral part, which we'll talk about, but it plays up on the omnipotence and just how you think you can have everything, but what happens once you have everything?
Being
And
omnipotent doesn't sound as fun as you think it is for Q
yeah,
when you hear it from
Yeah.
Quinn.
and I'll tell you what, the other aspect of it is I just got to say they did a beautiful job handling a very heavy subject in suicide in this episode.
Yeah.
I thought Kate Mulgrew as Janeway handled it brilliantly. I thought Tuvok was excellent in the way he handled it, considering Vulcan culture and just how they handled that discussion and how they reached certain decisions. I think it's one of the more actually well written suicide centric episodes of television I've ever seen.
Like Timothy from TNG, whose life ended at
That's right.
60.
Yeah.
Which means I've got 5 years left, guys.
Oh,
So
one more thing we forgot that we learned about the Q, or our Q. He obviously enjoys appearing in the beds of Starfleet captains.
this is true. We'll tease that in the next segment here. But yeah, he has fun with that. But if you're watching the slideshow here, and I'm going to bring this up again later for our another segment here, is when Quinn, I'm just going to call him Quinn Quinn, takes for this hearing, he takes him down to the planet that is this Q kind of prison that what he had to kind of live through here. And there's little things that kind of drive you insane. Like there's a sign that says never closes. There's a clock with no hands on it. Someone's reading a book called The Old. And then the one that I thought was really sad was when he's like, oh yeah, that's the Scarecrow. I did the Scarecrow for a while.
Yeah.
And then Q says, everyone does a Scarecrow, it's like, well, that's kind
deal.
of sad, And so you're getting a little idea of what this guy's going through. This 300 years of just not having his powers and just being stuck in this void, basically. And we get a little in there. And I got to give it up for Garrett here. He was absolutely wonderful. He was very charming. He was very, even though he accidentally made all the men disappear on Voyager, he didn't mean to do that, but he was very, kind if he could be. And I thought that was interesting. And I think he was very happy to finally be out of confinement. I think that he felt in a way safe aboard Voyager as well. Kyle.
One other great moment in here, as soon as they mention Q without missing a beat, Janeway goes, red alert.
Yes.
Red alert.
Not missing a beat.
Yep.
Not even a pause. It's just like, Q, red alert.
Yes. All right, guys, let's go ahead and get into the next mission report. So this is where we have a little fun with the episode before we get a little more serious again here. Is there a Q scene? Well, what is the best or most memorable Q moment in this? Is there a Q scene or Q character moment that best stands out for you in this episode? What's great is that we get 2 Qs in this. And if you're looking at the YouTube video, I have some shots of some good Q moments there. And for the listeners, first of all, we have the first appearance of Quinn in the what do you call that? The cafeteria. And then, of course, when they're doing the hearing, you have Q saying, I'd like to bring a witness. I like to bring myself, and then de Lancie has 2 of him there. And then they bring 3 people, Maury Ginsburg, Isaac Newton, and William Riker to give some thoughts. And then there's some history with them as well. And then the other one, too, is you alluded to, Gary. I'm going to let you go first here. Q likes to show up in captain's bedrooms. What is your favorite moment?
It has to be the when we get the 3rd Q. Basically, we get our Q duplicated. So we have 3 Qs in this episode because that's great. I'd like to call myself, and then they go on like a little love fest for a second. Oh, thank you so much for being here. Oh, I'm so honored. Thank you. And it's like I thought, well, that could have gone on for about 10 minutes. And he's cross-examining himself. I just thought, whoever thought of that, it was well written, it was funny, it was really well played. That's my favorite scene in the episode.
Gotcha. Kyle, what about you, sir?
Come on, the ultimate game of Q hide and seek. That just bang, 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 bang. And it just it's just great. and it's so much fun. I love that moment. You know, of course, we get the ornament reference. We get, oh, we're at the birth of the universe. We're being attacked by protons. I mean, it's the whole thing of it. And you can just see Janeway just losing her mind as this is going on. Like, enough already. And again, that's a lot of credit to Kate Mulgrew for just rolling with this and playing it up, dealing not with one but two Qs.
So I got a question. So this is was it second season, if I remember correctly?
Yeah,
second season.
Was it weird to have Riker come in, even though they were going to erase his memory and do that type of thing? And I'm sure the tease to this episode, they briefly would show Riker, and so you're wondering, like, wait a minute, how is Riker on Voyager and stuff like that? I didn't have a problem with it, but it does feel a little shoehorned in. But then they tied it into his old iron boots,
right.
Riker, and then the other gentleman that either saved him or was this Q, and how they kind of tied him in there. And then Maury Ginsburg was the guy that fixed Woodstock, and then Isaac Newton and the Apple was tied into all that as well. What do you think, Gary?
Well, had this been first season, I would have thought, okay, yeah, this is a stunt. This is kind of like along the lines of putting Q in the 6th episode of Deep Space Nine.
Yeah.
But at this point, it's toward the tail end of the 2nd season. This show doesn't need legitimizing at this point by bringing in a TNG character. And they've already had, in Caretaker, the first episode, we had them start on Deep Space Nine. So you've already had the Deep Space Nine Voyager kind of character crossover when they're in Quarks. When they're in Quarks, Quark is trying to cheat Harry. Tom comes in and helps him out. And this is, I think, a good way to just for a moment bring in a little touch of TNG now to kind of, spread it out. And I did enjoy the moment when, Riker goes, Captain Janeway, and she tells him, we're lost in the Delta Quadrant. He's kind of surprised. And I thought it was a really nice moment. It didn't seem a cynical, ratings grab or anything. It worked for me.
Come on, the fact that he turned on the Riker charm immediately as he saw Janeway, because you could see the shift in the voice, his attitude. He was giving Janeway a little bit of the Riker there.
Q, what the hell is this? Hello.
The only thing I missed was the Riker maneuver on a chair. That's the only thing I was missing here. So,
Kevin, just on the note with Riker too, when I first watched this episode, they surprised me because it makes sense to have Riker on this episode. I just didn't think they were going in the direction they were going in. I thought they'd play up the fact that Riker was a Q for a short time and could bring that perspective.
They never addressed it. Like, you brought that up before, Kyle. You're like, you had mentioned in a previous Q episode that it would have been nice if Riker would have come in and said, I was a Q once and here's my take on it. And they didn't do that with this either.
Yeah, and I really surprised. That really surprised me because I thought this was like the perfect opportunity to do it. And said, "Oh well, he saved Riker's long lost, long ago relative. So hey, if he didn't do that, you wouldn't exist." And Riker, like I said, Riker can bring the fact he was human, then became a Q, and then became human again. That's an interesting perspective. That would have been. I'd love to have heard it in this, especially in this setting.
Yeah. And Jim in the chat says regarding the stunt guest star here with Riker says 3 words: ratings, ratings, ratings. Yeah, they're not wrong.
And I know that, of course, I understand that it's kind of it's like a contractual thing, but I always thought it would have been so great if they hadn't put Riker in the trailer for the next episode trailer, and B, if they would have left his credits to the end of the episode, so when he appears in this, it is like a shock to everybody watching because nobody's expecting. But I know contractually you can't do that.
Well, and they were not going to put Riker in an episode and not advertise it.
Well, yes, no, you're right. You're right. True. Really, one question, if I could just ask the two of you, and forgive me, Kevin, if you were about to ask this.
Okay.
If we were back in like 1996 and you could decide which one character of the next generation would have appeared in this, would you have picked Riker or would you have picked another next gen character.
Ooh, well, what's funny is now that Kyle brought it up, I probably would have brought Riker because he was Q. And that would have been I mean, it's funny because it's Q that brings these three in, right? Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting that Q would choose Riker because he made him a Q. Could that have worked against his argument in the hearing when Riker says, yeah, you made me Q, but I realized what was really important and it wasn't real. And he could have gone on a whole soliloquy with that. So, I mean, Kyle, you've nailed this on the head before. It should be Riker, right?
Yeah. I don't think anybody else makes real sense because let's say you bring in Patrick Stewart. That's a whole can of worms that I think actually hurts Voyager. I think it hurts the show if you bring in Patrick Stewart at this moment.
Jim in the chat says, imagine if Q would have brought in Worf. I think Q was smart enough to not bring in a hostile witness.
Right. Worf would have charged at him, and Q would have had to snap him away.
Yeah, I think if you were going to bring in anybody outside of Riker, Data was your only option.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, it's funny. I was thinking Troy because of her, empathy and stuff like that. But Data would have been a good, like, impartial, like, person to bring in, So yeah.
And because Q has that interesting relationship with Data as well.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, because he was kind to him, So yeah, good stuff there. Jim, I love that idea of warp. That's funny. That's a good one. All right, let's get into the interesting mission report here I got for you guys. Okay, so the fourth mission report that we do here is usually it's the general discussion, any other comments, topics, or observations about this episode that you'd like to share. And I'm bringing one to the table here because this is kind of important, and this is what this is about and why Quinn, the first Q, of course, why he's doing what he's doing. But I want to kind of set the stage for you here first. So the burden of immortality is addressed in this episode, but it's also addressed in another movie series and TV series, which I'm going to bring up in a moment. So my question is, your thoughts on mortality and what would you do? I want you to stew on that for a little bit while I bring up an article here. And I thought this was interesting here. Here's a really cool picture on YouTube here. If you're watching, it's the Wheels of Time, and there's a lone gentleman there looking at this. I thought it was really cool. And this is from an article that came out earlier this year, November 13th, 2025, by Danielle Fletcher, In Life and Death. And this is on www.plankship.org. The ethical dilemmas of immortality and life and death. The question for eternal life, a perennial dream woven into the fabric of human mythology and ambition, has long transcended the realm of mere fantasy to become a tantalizing scientific possibility. But as we're inch closer to the future where life and death might no longer be an escapable binary, we must confront a profound set of ethical dilemmas. Is immortality truly a blessing, or does it carry an unbearable moral burden? This article delves into the philosophical quandaries that arise when the finite nature of human existence is challenged, exploring how our understanding of duty, good and evil would be irrevocably transformed. So it goes into this thing here. It says the shifting sands of life and death. For millennia, the inevitability of death has shaped human experiences, lending urgency to our ambitions, profundity to our relationships, and the meaning to our brief time on Earth. Philosophers from ancient Greece to the modern era have grappled with this fundamental truth. Aristotle and his Nicomachean Ethics posits that true happiness is achieved over a complete life, implying a finite span within which one can cultivate virtue. The very concept of, quote, a good death or a, quote, life well lived is predicated an ending. What happens then when this fundamental boundary dissolves? And there's like three main bullet points here. the de-evaluation of experience. If every moment in one of our infinite number does the individual moment lose its preciousness, would the intensity of joy, sorrow, or achievement diminish when there's no final curtain? The other bullet point is the nature of identity. Our identities are forged through change, growth, and the passage of time. How would being an immortal being maintain a coherent sense of self across millennia, accumulating an unimaginable repository of memories and experiences? Would the self become fluid to the point of disillusion? And last but not least, the meaning of legacy. If no one ever dies, the traditional concept of leaving a legacy for future generations becomes moot. What drives ambition to where there's no ends to one's own story? The removal of death as a motivator fundamentally reconfigures the human psyche, challenging deeply ingrained philosophical tenets about purpose and existence. So I bring that to the table. I know there's a lot to chew on there, guys, but what this episode does is it dives into the burdens of immortality and what does it mean when you don't have a death that's forthcoming, and does it really make sense, and does it mean what it means? And I'm showcasing the pictures here on the slides of this kind of what do you call it when you're just stuck in a place and nothing happens? What's that called? That word?
Purgatory.
Purgatory. Thank you. That's what we're seeing here with Quinn. You know, the sign that says never closes, the clock with no hands. You know, and so we're reminded this is kind of a hell. You're just stuck in this purgatory. And then he wants to die, and he chooses to die. And the reason why I bring this up is because one of the shows that we have here on the network is our Blooded Kings Highlander podcast, which I'm a co-host of. I'm a big fan of Highlander. And if you know what Highlander is, it's basically these secret immortals that live among humans, and they battle to the death. And the only way you can kill them is by beheading them. When you behead them, they release this thing that's called the quickening, and you soak that up. You soak up their powers. You soak up their memories. But one of the things that the TV show did really, really well, because it got more, got 6 seasons to talk about immortality, is the burden of mortality. Living for so long, seeing so many loved ones die, seeing so many things happen. You can do nothing. You can't die unless someone takes your head. Or in any other immortal type of story, how does can Q's die? Other than someone giving them the ability to do it. So I bring it to the table here, guys. Immortality. Would you do it?
I think it depends, because it's much like when we talk about Highlander. And if you would like to know more about immortality on Highlander, please buy Fearful Symmetry by John Mosby. John, you owe me $1.
The Essential Guide to Highlander, John Mosby. Yes.
It depends on what the rules to your immortality are. Is your immortality that you can never be hurt? That if you get hurt, you heal? Does your body still age? And what I mean by that is, where in your life point have you become immortal? Because I think that's always an interesting aspect of it. Is, are you in your 20s, in your 30s?
Well, that's a good point, Kyle, because in Highlander, you become immortal at the age that you die. And of course, when you look at the original film, Sean Connery is immortal. He was probably in his late 50s, early 60s when he died. And then that's the way you look for the rest of your life, basically. You are immortal wherever, there was a really good Highlander episode where a 10-year-old boy who was immortal, he became immortal when he was 10. And he stayed a kid for 400 years, just like that we got in the Interview with the Vampire. They turned a young girl, and she stayed a young girl the whole time. And that became a burden because she had to always pretend to be a little girl, even though she was hundreds of years old, So, yeah, I mean, if you want to kind of use those parameters to kind of say, well, I might enjoy immortality for a while, but then when I start seeing people I care for die,
Well, and it comes to a lot of things. I think immortality is more of a curse than it is something that is a gift, because if you just look at it again in the parameters of I'm immortal, I'm walking the earth immortal. You're losing all these people you love. Eventually, you're going to have to cover up who you are. You're going to have to, like in Highlander, if they die, like when Richie Ryan dies in the motorcycle accident racing, he can't go back to Europe for like a lifespan.
Yeah, you have to kind of reinvent yourself as an immortal, because if you expose yourself as an immortal in today's life and society, you're going to be burned like a witch, or quartered and drawn,
or worse, captured and experimented on. I mean, I think the if you want to talk about that aspect of it, the Old Guard handled that brilliantly.
The Netflix movies, check those out. Yeah,
but I think what it boils down to, just on the if you're talking just on the aspect of mental. There's part of you that would be curious because you'd want to see the history. And I think that's human nature. But the problem is that, guess what? You're on the planet Earth till it dies. And then what happens after the planet Earth dies? Right. Are you the lone soul on this dead planet that can't kill himself, that cannot die? You cannot die. It's where you, like with Highlander, you're immortal, but to a point, you still can eventually be killed. If you're talking, you're immortal without like the Q powers and everything like that. That would be an absolutely horrible existence.
That would be hell.
Existence, because there's no end for you.
Yeah.
And that's a scary proposition.
All right, Gary, what are your thoughts? First of all, Jim says, according to the Picard series, Qs die, just not in the linear thinking of a human. Yeah, that's right. I remember him, I think Q saying he was dying in that. Interesting. Yeah. Okay, so Gary, give me your thoughts of immortality and the burdens of it.
Yeah, I never watched the Highlander TV show, but I know in the first movie, they do make it a point that as he's lived, from the 1700s to now, that it seems like he wasn't just kind of sitting around wasting his life. I mean, he fought in the war, which is where he found the little girl who then grew up and became his assistant, and had a business and all of that, kind of living his life, just hoping, doing what he had to do to not get caught. I think for me, the biggest thing is one of the things that Kyle mentioned, which is you can't die while everybody you love around you does. That for me would be the hellish aspect of this, because eventually you would realize, well, I'm not going to bother, falling in love, hanging with family, because how many times can I repeat the cycle of, watching them, grow up and die, and I'm still here. Eventually, I think you would shut yourself off to that altogether.
Yeah.
Just because the pain of that would be unbearable. I think that, and I know it's going to sound cliche, but one of the things that defines, most of what we do and a lot of our outlook is the fact that we are immortal. We only have a limited amount of time. It defines how we live. It defines the choices we make. It defines the risks we take in life. It kind of defines the choices we make in that, we only have a limited time. So, it's about doing as much as you can, hopefully for somebody else, or to leave the world in a better shape, about doing as much as you can with the time you have. If that limit is taken away, then I actually think that this episode's representation of the Q is pretty much very accurate. At some point, you're just going to become so lazy. You would have seen everything, read everything, done variations of everything, that there would be nothing new. There would be nothing new to experience, to explore. So that kind of like ennui and boredom, and just kind of like, whatever, been there, done that, I think it would end up like these Q, where they're just sitting around staring off into space, looking at magazines and everything. Because as they ask here, when you've experienced it all, what else is there? When he asked Janeway, if you couldn't explore, if you couldn't do what's in your nature to do, what would you have left? I think it's very interesting in this episode that because I think the specific dialogue in this about immortality is very interesting, because Quinn says, as we evolved, we sacrificed mortality. The logical conclusion of that is the Qs were once mortal. I mean, that's at least what I take out of it. If you take what Quinn says literally, as we evolved, we sacrificed mortality, meaning they were once mortal, they sacrificed of it. And now he says the Q have no desire for change or capacity for growth in what he calls the new era. So again, there's that kind of like laziness where it's like, why should I even bother doing anything, because tomorrow's going to be the same as today, next week's going to be the same as today, next century is going to be the same as today. It would kill your desire to experience anything if there's nothing to experience. And so I think that would be the inevitable result.
Kyle.
I think there's one other thing to consider here, because and Gary, you'll know, I know you're a Doctor Who fan, so you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. There was a character played by John Barrowman, and that character was immortal. Well, that character was also part of a series called Torchwood, and there was a mini-series called Torchwood Miracle Day. And in that, the entire human race becomes immortal, basically. And he brings up a point to somebody he's about to have intercourse with. He still wanted him to use protection. He's like, we may be immortal, but we can still get sick. And again, that comes back to what rules are you playing by? And I think that's one of the key aspects to it. And I think a more interesting question, because I think it's human nature for most everybody to want to learn and discover and advance yourself. If somebody came to you and said, okay, we'll stop your aging at, let's say, 35, and you get to live for 1,000 years, disease-free, healthy, everything like that. But at that end of 1,000 years, you drop dead. Would you take that opportunity? Because of all the things to learn, all the things to explore, knowing nothing could happen to you, but you still have a finite time, but it's extended out.
Gary's shaking his head, but I'm kind of nodding. I'm kind of tempted by that offer there, Kyle.
I guess honestly, then it gets into the subjective point of what is it that you basically kind of want out of life. I mean, Kyle, yes. I mean, if you're the type of person who wants to continually explore new things, to push yourself to the limit of your own experience and knowledge, and use every second to find out, as much as there is to learn. Yeah, I can see how, 100 years of that or 1,000 years of that versus 68 or whatever would be immensely appealing. But I think you'd have to, Kyle, you started your comments with, well, it depends. And so I think it does depend. I think it depends on what each of us individually thinks, a great life would be. What would be the what would be the components of that? The only thing I could say for me personally that would appeal to me about being immortal or for living 1,000 years is I think it would actually give me time to watch all my videos.
Yeah, there you go.
Which I don't think I'm going to get.
Now you're talking, Gary.
Yes.
Now you're talking.
I think in 1,000 years, Kevin can have everything ever put out on physical media and own it, and he'd probably be able to sell some of the collector's items and buy a really big house to fit it all in, or have a warehouse built or something. It'd be like Warehouse 13 for physical media.
Let's just put it this way. My Letterbox app would be blowing up if I had the time to do it and watch all these videos. Yeah, I'm tempted to do it because, I want to experience so much, but I've also experienced, tragedy and death, and it takes a toll, it takes a certain type of way. Some people handle it better than others. And I think I've handled it as well as I could, but there's still a part of me that depending on the situation and what the immortality parameters that we set forward, like if we're living in the world of Highlander, I'd have to have someone behead me if I want to end my life. What do I do? Just lay on a train track, let a train roll over my neck, But then there's a part of me too, like if in Highlander, if I were to be beheaded, all of my knowledge and all of my know-how would be transferred to the person that took my head, and so then I would kind of live on through someone else. But if
it
we're
would be
just
an immortal
talking,
10-year-old boy.
yeah, I know, yeah, exactly. But if it was just kind of more of a generic immortal thing, like I like your idea. I get 1,000 years. I look 35 for 1,000 years, and I get to experience whatever I could. But I mean, I would definitely take advantage of it. I would travel. I would learn languages. I would go to school again. I would do whatever I could. Of course, if you're talking nowadays, I'd have to figure out a way to live underneath the radar, because when I start 20 years later and I'm still looking 35, people are going to go, and what kind of unicorn milk are you drinking, dude?
No. Kevin, you just changed your name to Paul Rudd.
Yes. But anyway, I appreciate you guys' thoughts on that. That's what's good about Star Trek, and specifically this episode, Death Wish.
Before we go, I am curious.
Oh, okay.
Do you think that I'm putting that I'm misinterpreting Quinn's comment about the as we evolve, we sacrifice mortality, implying that the Q were once mortal, or am I just misreading that?
No, I think that's a definite part, because the Q can still
think it's
die.
accurate.
Talk about capital punishment with the Q. I think when you do get that kind of power, you do make everything has a price. Everything, and in this case, the Q's omnipotence was sacrificing their mortality and in their own way, their humanity, and now they're living with the consequences of that.
Yeah,
we are in the final segment of general discussion. I think we really need to have a quick discussion about Gary's T-shirt. I mean, it's pretty cool.
Ho ho ho, everybody!
Yeah. Trek the halls. You got a T-shirt, which is kind of like an ugly sweater, but it's a T-shirt. It says Trek the halls. You've got the classic Trek phasers on there as well, and that's pretty cool.
Well, it's the holiday season, everybody.
I love it. That's great. Well, guys, we got one more thing that we have to discuss, and that, of course, is our final mission report, and that is, who is your episode or cast or guest star MVP? So we're diving into Star Trek Voyager, specifically season 2 here. If you're watching the video, I got the season 2 cast picture up there. But I want to get your guys' thought. Who is your episode MVP here? And I've got some pictures here, of course, of Quinn and Q. Some of our guest stars that got beamed in, including Riker himself, Isaac Newton, Maury Ginsburg, Riker with his picture of his old Iron Boots relative. Of course, we had some moments, of course, with Quinn and Janeway. A moment I like too with Quinn and, of course, Tuvok, because Tuvok was his like technical lawyer. And then we have Quinn himself. Gary, I'm going to start with you. Who is your episode MVP?
I'm going to have to say our Q, because first of all, it's just great to see him in this new environment. It's great, and he plays like a fundamentally serious role. I mean, yes, he toys with Janeway a couple of times.
de Lancie is awesome in this one.
Yeah, by appearing in her bed and by being the kind of devil on her shoulder to offer her a return home as a temptation. But you can tell that especially once they go into the representation of the continuum, that he's struggling to for his confidence in pushing back and arguing against what Quinn wants to do is really, really wavering. And you can tell that he is starting to buy in and see, understand where Quinn is coming from, so much so that at the end he is the one that I think is affected most by Quinn's like adulation of him, I think. And then at the very end, which I think is the very honestly moving scene, where he gives Quinn the means to kill himself, and it expresses admiration. He was really the irrepressible one. All these different beats over just the course of one episode, and de Lancie is perfect in every one of them.
Well said. Jim says Garrett Graham. That's his voice. That's his pick there. And Jim, thank you again for participating in the chat. Really appreciate you, man. That's a good vote there. Kyle, what say you? Who is your MVP of this episode?
As I was saying about the episode, it goes back and forth to me between Garrett Graham's Q and Janeway. And I think I convinced myself earlier when I brought up it's Janeway in this episode. To be dealing with two Qs, really her first experience with Qs, to maintaining a calm with Q the whole episode for the most part, other than waking up and finding him in her bed. I mean, I think that'd freak anybody out. But, and again, how she handles such a heavy subject. And let's not forget, she's one of the first human beings to go to the home of the continuum and experience that and see that. Picard doesn't get that. Janeway had it. And I think that's a big thing. And just how she carried herself like a true captain, how she carried herself with Q in a different way, where you don't really see her let Q get under her skin.
Like, Kyle, let me interrupt you real quick. There's a scene where I feel like when she first mentions, and this is playing to your nomination of Janeway here, about doing a hearing. Our Q, de Lancie seems very excited about that. Am I wrong if I'm remembering?
No,
that
he's
right?
very. It's a flashback right to TN, the first episode of TNG.
Yeah, like, he's like, great. I get to get in a verbal, challenge here, and that's something that he loves.
Well, and I think that's the thing. I think Janeway impressed him in a way he wasn't expecting. Cisco was basically physical with him, which turned him off to that because he's like, oh, it's too easy.
Yeah.
Janeway was like Picard in a different way, but Janeway presented a different challenge and a different curiosity to Q that he never had really experienced before. And that's why one of the reasons why it was so easy to write him back into later episodes of Voyager, because of the chemistry between Janeway and Q. And like Jim said earlier, de Lancie and Kate Mulgrew have been almost lifelong friends, and they have this amazing chemistry together, and it works, but it works in a way that's different than Patrick Stewart as Picard, and it's a different type of relationship because Janeway doesn't let Q get to her in a way where Picard would get frustrated with Q at times, still kept a rational thing. Where I think Janeway was just like, Q's trying to figure out, how do I break her? How do I break her? I gave her the ultimate temptation of getting back home, and she still didn't give in.
Yeah, good stuff.
Kevin, would you have liked to have seen, since you mentioned the hearing, would you have liked to see when Janeway mentions the hearing, RQ goes, a hearing, and snaps his fingers, and he's back in his Farpoint judge's robe. And Janeway goes like, what the hell is that? And he goes, oh, too much? And then he'll snap himself back.
I have to admit, I do love it too when they start the hearing and he keeps calling her Madame Captain, and she's like, stop with the Madame.
Yeah.
I have one question for you, Kyle, since you nominated Janeway, and they didn't really give a lot of time to this, I think probably because we know ultimately the decision she would make. Do you think that Janeway, even for like a brief moment, would have been struggled a little bit with offered that temptation of getting her crew home? Because they glossed over that very quickly. I mean, ultimately, yes, we know that being who she was, she would have said, look, it's tempting, but I have to stand up and be fair for this man. But they didn't even acknowledge that struggle at all.
I think they did. And here's how they acknowledged it. She's up. She can't sleep. She's dealing with that part of the struggle just as much as she is with making the decision for Q. And I think Q blew it, because I think she was really considering it until Q hit her with the, oh, it's running over the hill and it's me and not Mark. And I think that's when it really sank in for Janeway, the price to accept that offer from Q and what what it would be. And I think that
Yeah.
that took some of that weight off of Janeway of like, no, this is not, the price of this is not worth getting the crew home. We will find another way.
Yeah. Those are really good nominations there, and they're not wrong at all. Those are really good. I'm going to go though with Garrett Graham. He's going to be my choice for the MVP. The reason why, and this is where Jim in the chat also mentioned Garrett Graham. If you're going to be a Q and you're coming to this playground of being part of the Q continuum, and John de Lancie is so good at doing what it is, you really got to bring your game. And I thought Amanda Rogers, Olivia Diabo did a good job. And I thought Garrett Graham did a wonderful job bringing a different perspective of the Q and what he's going through, and wanting to have a Q kill themselves and give up their power. And, I understand him being in jail, Q jail, but being released, you would think he might have a new lease on life and want to, explore that more than just end his life, And so I thought that at every corner, every scene, he was able to stand toe to toe with John de Lancie. And I thought Garrett was absolutely phenomenal. So he gets my vote for those reasons there. So good stuff there, guys. Good conversation. Appreciate that as always. This is, of course, the Union Federation podcast here on the Fandom Podcast Network. Been discussing the Star Trek Q Fan Collective episodes. And we are in the final 3. We're now almost done with this one. We have 2 more to go after this one. I want to get your guys' final thoughts on episode 237, Union Federation, Death Wish from Star Trek Voyager. Let's start with you, Gary.
As I said, this is this episode showcases the best of what Star Trek can be. And I think they did a great job exploring a really dicey issue, and beautifully written. It was a great showcase for Janeway. And it develops our understanding of Q and the continuum. And I think I think Voyager is going to go on to have a lot of really, really great episodes. But if I were to construct like a top 10 of Voyager, chances are likely this would be on that list.
Would be on the list?
It would be on the list, yeah.
Gotcha. Well said. All right. Kyle. Well, first of all, wait, Gary, where can we find you?
You can find me on X at Gary _retro, on Facebook as Gary Akers, and you can find me also on the Fandom Podcast Network on Thursdays with Dan and the gang on Type 40, and then on Saturdays, discussing Doctor Who on Type 40, and then on Saturdays on the Spacebook discussing everything else.
Awesome. Very cool. You're a busy guy. I appreciate that. Giving a lot of love to the Fandom Podcast Network.
Yeah. Well, it's worth it.
Kyle, give us your final thoughts on Death Wish.
Well, first of all, I do agree with Gary. I think this is one of the top 10 episodes of Voyager in the run. And I think that this is an episode where it was placed in season 2 is the kind of episode that brings some people on who maybe were still unsure about Voyager season, maybe still not quite sure what they saw in season 1. I think it really solidified it. I think it's one of Kate Mulgrew's better performances as Janeway. I think it's actually one of the more fun de Lancie episodes as Q, because you got to see him in a different light as Q, playing off of Kate Mulgrew, again, with their pre-existing friendship and just the ease of which he is with Q at this point. And it's a Q that didn't work so much making a guest appearance on DS9, but is absolutely wonderful in this episode of Voyager. And it is so well written and so powerful of an episode considering the topic they're dealing with. And like you said it, Kevin, too, Garrett being able to handle himself playing against John de Lancie as Q was phenomenal. This is incredibly well acted. I would be willing to put this episode in my top 25 of all time Trek episodes.
Wow.
Ooh, well said. Nice. All right. Well, we want to give a little tease for the next episode, and the ramifications of this episode carry into the next Q episode that we're going to be discussing, and that is going to be the Q in the Gray from 1996, and we find out what's happening with the Q continuum, and the other woman shows up. The other Q shows up for this one. We're looking forward to getting into that one there. So that'll be episode 238 coming next week, Monday Night Live here on the Fandom Podcast Network. Make sure you check that out. Returning this episode, it was nice to just jump into Voyager again and get a little taste of it. But then, getting another Q to shine in this and presenting us with the dilemma of immortality was just absolute wonderful. Just Trek. This is where Trek cooks, and that's why we love Trek, because it provokes these thoughts and these quandaries and what ifs, and it creates for a great discussion. So I'm looking forward to getting into the next episode and finding out how the ramifications of these events carry forward. So this is the Union Federation here on the Fandom Podcast Network, both also on the BQN. Make sure you check us out on both of those there, and you can find the Fandom Podcast Network and myself. I am Kevin Reitzel. You can find me at Spartan_Phoenix on Blue Sky, X, Instagram, Discord, as well as Letterbox and stuff like that. So make sure you check that out. Fandom Podcast Network is also on Facebook. Make sure you check that out. And also check out the Union Federation on our Union Federation Facebook group too, as well. We have a lot of discussion on Trek and also Orville. We'd appreciate that. Also give us a shout out on TeePublic. If you want to get cool Union Federation t-shirts that I'm wearing or any other stuff there, go to the Union Federation, get all kinds of cool apparel, hats, shirts, mugs, anything, but get anything getting printed there. So make sure you check that out. So, I gotta give a shout out to Amy and Haley. They couldn't be here tonight, but we're thinking about them. Hopefully we'll get them next week as well. We miss you guys. Anyway, guys, thank you again so much for joining us. Thank you for watching. And I want to thank again, Jim, for in the chat as well. Really appreciate your participation, Jim. Appreciate you. Until next time, guys, live long and prosper. And without a doubt, we are the weirdest ship in the fleet. We'll see you guys next week.